like empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And I noticed one thing that cuts across these processes that I felt like, okay, these are like some of the core fundamentals if you want to really hack this process. Okay, so I'll touch on some of them. I'll break it down, then I'll also look at ways to improve your designs. Okay, and some of the cons and pros as well. So with the core fundamentals, the first thing that comes in mind is you understanding the problem. So whatever design tag that you are tagged with, you need to make sure that you understand the problem. That's the first thing. And you understanding the problem is like, when you actually hack that, that's like 80% of the design done. Because I feel like before you come up with a great design that solves a particular problem, you need to really understand the problem itself. Because how can you solve the problem if you don't understand it? So you need to make sure that you really understand what you are solving. Okay. So you understanding what you are solving, that's by you communicating with the person you are working with. So for a freelancer, maybe a client comes up to you and says that, oh, okay, I need a website design. Sometimes you realize that after talking to them for a while, you realize that, oh, probably they don't even need a website in the first place. Probably it's just, a social media strategy that they need to come up with. Or sometimes they feel like, oh, when they get the website done, they'll get the people that really for their business. But sometimes you realize that's not really the case. So by you asking them the questions, and with the questions, I normally go with the 5 whys. So with the 5 whys, you actually get to the root cause of the problem. So when they say that, okay, they need a website done, you ask them why they need a website done. They will give you another reason. You ask them why that's the problem. Then per your answers that you get from them, you realize, okay, now there's like the core fundamental, like there's the core cause of the problem they are trying to solve. So by getting that, it's very easy for you to now come up with solutions for them. So I feel like understanding the problem is really key. Okay. And the next one being you scoping out and ideating. Now, with that, I feel like normally with my process, I go with quantity over quality. Okay. So normally I try to come up with as many ideas as possible. Now, in this stage, you need to be mindful of the way you think. So you go with the divergent thinking, right? Divergent thinking being that you come up with as many crazy ideas as possible. At this moment, you are not looking for quality, like I said. It's more about the quantity. So just focus on getting like a lot of ideas, be it bad or good. At that moment, we are not looking for quality. So come up with a lot of ideas, then you scope it down. Now, when you are scoping it down, that's where your convergent thinking comes in. So this time around, you are trying to scope it down based on what you actually understood from the problem. So you understanding the problem, you are able to like come up with a problem statement. Okay, so the problem statement will kind of help you focus on how you think about this particular problem. So then you test, you iterate. When you are done like with the convergent thinking, coming up with solutions, now you know that there's what you are working on, right? Then later on, you give it to your users or whoever you feel like it's in that particular stage where they need to test it. You give it to them to test. So basically, these are like the core fundamentals that runs through them. And even when I'll give an example. When I was in the engineering space, for instance, sometimes when I'm called upon that, okay, there's a breakdown, okay, that needs to be solved. Normally, I don't go there assuming that, I know the problem. Normally, I talk to the operators about it, like, okay, what happened? Why did this happen? Sometimes you might be surprised the answer they will give you. I'm not saying that you having a bias is a problem, but if you try to use that bias, like focus on it entirely, you might get your problem statement wrong or your understanding of the problem wrong. Now, you getting that wrong, that means obviously the end product wouldn't be well because, yes, you are solving a wrong problem. You get it. So your bias, you should be mindful of your bias because sometimes when people approach you that they need stuff done, sometimes you have a fair idea of what they need to do, okay, or what you need to do. But you need to keep that in check. Just ask them questions that you feel like, okay, open-ended questions. Let them talk about the problem. Then you might be surprised the answer they will give you and how you also like get insights from that particular like combo. Okay, so I also believe that when you understand these core fundamentals, it can actually help you, because as newbies, sometimes you are forced to think that like the design thinking process is kind of like a linear process, and you realize there's this trend, especially with case studies, that's like design case studies, US case studies. You realize there's this like linear process that cuts through them. They go from empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. And it's like, if you don't go through this process, you are not doing it right. But I'm here to tell you that it's not linear. Okay, it depends on the problem you are trying to solve. That's why I said that understanding the problem first is like 80% of the design. Okay, so you need to be mindful, because at times it could be a design from scratch, it could be a redesign. And the redesign, you might be surprised that sometimes when clients come to you that, oh, they need a particular redesign, probably it could be that, let's say for a subscription, they are not getting people to subscribe to whatever they are doing, their products, right? That's their conversion. That's what they are using. Now, it could be that maybe probably that particular subscribe button is not like big enough. But when they come to you and they will be like, okay, I need you to redesign this for me. Then as a designer, you want to like show your power. So you start off, you just design everything, like come up with new designs and all that. But maybe probably you maybe increasing the button a bit might actually solve the problem. You get it? That's why I said that you understanding the problem is really the key. Because if you did your due diligence and you ask them the right questions, I'm sure probably you know that, okay, there's a particular problem with the subscribe button, right? So that's another issue. Another thing that I also feel like as a designer, you need to be mindful of is what you take in. So I go by garbage in, garbage out, right? Whatever you consume, that's what you give out. So if it's design inspiration, if the design inspiration is average, you come up with average designs, or whatever you consume is average, you come up with average designs. Don't expect someone who sees like regular designs or designs that are not good, you expect them to deliver some spectacular designs. It doesn't work that way. Okay, that's why it's advisable when you are starting to actually replicate these design industries, like companies that are design focused. You take Apple, Spotify, like those companies, you realize their website, you take their website, you try and replicate it, okay, just to get your eyes like seeing like good designs from bad designs. Because at the end of the day, if you don't replicate it, you wouldn't know how they come about with their layout, how their layout is done, how they come up with their typography, how they scale it. You get their color usage. You wouldn't find out this if like you don't really replicate their designs. So garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you consume, that's what you produce. Okay, so when you look at the design process and it gets to a point where you need to ideate, you need to come up with a lot of like design solutions, right? Mostly what you come up with, aside you having like a mood board. So let's say if a typical project, they come to you, okay, we need a new website or a new product design. You also communicate with them, get to know where their visual direction. You come up with mood boards. Okay, what do they like? What do they like about this design? They tell you about it, because what you don't want is you finally designing everything, then you realize that the direction that you went wasn't even what the stakeholders were expecting. As much as we want to look design from a point where it's like we are mostly focusing on the user needs, business goes to matters, and that means stakeholders also have a say in your design. So you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm a designer, I know what I'm doing. You should be mindful of the people you are working with too as well. That's your stakeholders, because they actually have a say in actually pushing the pixels or not. You get it? So you having a clear direction, you having understanding the problem, giving them like, okay, the mood board they select, then based on that, you know that, oh, okay, this is what they are going for. You scope it out. Okay, now you scoping it out, like I said earlier, that's like now your convergent thinking stage, where you actually try to come up with, after coming up with a lot of like ideas, you try to scope it down, get the best ideas, then work on that, work around that. So another thing which I also want to mention that normally people don't take it seriously, which is maybe like you having rest. I mean, you taking breaks. So sleeping, for instance, right? Me helps me because when I'm in that process and I feel like okay, I'm actually stuck. I don't know what to do. Sometimes I sleep. Sometimes me sleeping and coming back, I don't know how it works, but it magically works sometimes. When I sleep, I come back, then I get this new crazy ideas, right? I come up with them, try to ideate, come up with a whole lot of solutions. And like I said, normally with this stage, don't focus on the quality. If you are focusing on the quality, you wouldn't really come up with anything like serious. Just make sure you are just doing something. If it's foolish, like just do it. Just come up with crazy ideas. If it's just layout, if you are playing with your layouts, come up with as many layouts as possible. If it's a particular direction that you want, colors or whatever, just be playing around with it, right? Eventually you get one. Sometimes you are forced to go with the first design that comes in mind. And I promise you, if you are someone that normally do that, I bet that you wouldn't even know that you have like a better idea if you try to come up with this quantity thing that I always do, quantity over quality. And normally sometimes I start with like sketches before I come to Figma. It could take me, when I get design projects, sometimes it could take me like 2 3 days before I actually start using Figma, because I try to, like I said, understanding the problem is like 80% of the design. Like you've solved 80% of the design. So me understanding it, mainly cracking my head around the problem. Is this really is this really the problem? I try to like what is, because at the end of the day, to mind you, something like let's take startups for instance. Normally, it might be like, okay, we are trying to test this particular idea, that if it's solid or not. Okay. And if you feel like the testing will actually get you what you want, so you rather realize that you are spending a lot. It could be design costs, like design costs could be your resources that you use on that particular design or the time spent on that design. Now, with if you understand the problem, come up with, talk to users, do your research, right? Realize that you cut down that cost a lot, because now in terms of you iterating over and over, maybe probably you have some wireframes in there where you can actually like have people come in there and see, oh, okay, if this actually work, maybe your flow is right or not, right? Um, you doing that actually solves like most of the problem. So we should be mindful of like this particular stage. That's the early stage of the design process. I feel like mostly we underrate that. We are just focused on getting the pixels, like going into Figma, getting the shapes, whatever, like the gradient, whatever layout you have in mind. That's what we are mainly focused on. And if you are done with the design and it actually doesn't solve any problem, I don't know what you designed then, because design is supposed to solve a problem. And now you design something that's not actually solving the problem. That's a big issue. You get it? So you need to be mindful of that particular stage, you understanding the problem, your bias. You need to be mindful of your bias too as well, because like I said, it could really play a pivotal role in there. Your bias could actually hurt you in the long run, or it will help you. But sometimes you need to make sure that you keep that in check. Okay, you keeping that in check is just having this beginner's mindset where you talk to users, you don't assume. Sometimes we assume there's the problem, okay? And now when we are interviewing users or asking like stakeholders what the problem is, most of the time we realize the questions is more like justifying your assumptions, right? And if you are doing that, that means you are going with your assumptions. And at the end of the day, if we come up with the designs and it doesn't solve that problem, like I said, your cost will definitely go up. Your cost, it could be your resources. Cost doesn't necessarily mean your money. Cost could be your resources, right? And also your time spent on the project. And we don't want that. If you're in a fast-paced environment, it will actually hurt you, because now we need to get like solutions out there. And here's the case, you are making wrong assumptions. Meanwhile, you could actually like taking your time to understand the problem itself. Okay, so that's it for like the creative process. I mean, from pen to pixel. If you had to summarize it, I think there's it. Just make sure you understand these core fundamentals. You understanding the problem, you scoping and ideating and testing and iterate. Right, those are the core fundamentals. Now, with the design thinking process, I bet you all know it's like empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. I normally use this tea analogy, okay, where you have Milo, you have your tea, you have your sugar, you have your milk, okay. At the end of the day, we want to make a tea, okay. So whether I put in the sugar first, the milk first, or what is it, the Milo itself first, at the end of the day, I'll still make my tea, right? So you need to look at the stages, like your empathize defined as the ingredients, okay? You need to make sure you understand why this process is there in the first place, okay? So if someone actually comes with you with a problem, you know that, oh, do I need to really interview like people before I understand the problem? Sometimes it could be just a survey. You just need a survey to actually understand the problem. But since you don't really understand it, you feel like there's a linear process or linear approach. I need to go through these steps. You realize you are just wasting your time. And sometimes when you go through other people's case studies, you have this linear process in there. Whatever they come up with at the end, when you look at the start, you realize it doesn't really correlate because you don't see how they use the empathize, define whatever they came up with to actually solve that problem. So me using that T analogy, it's more about the process, like the end result, right? So you mixing it up, you just need to know what it does. So I know that for my tea, I need my sugar or whatever. Now, coming back to your stakeholders, right, or the users' needs. If let's say I'm someone that really likes a lot of milk, right? A lot of milk. That means I need to put in a lot of milk in my tea. Okay. Now you understanding the end result. You understanding that okay, this is what actually qualifies whatever I'm designing as a success. Okay, you need to have that metric because when you are done designing and then let's say you give it out to the stakeholders or you launch it, what's your metric for measuring success? Because you also need to be mindful of that too as well. Like I said, it's not mainly about the user goals. We need to be mindful of the business goals too as well. So if you are whatever solution that you come up with, you need to make sure that it aligns with the business goals and the users goals. Okay. So that's why I said you understanding the problem is like 80% of the design, because with that you realize you discover the business goals, you discover the users goals, and you are able to align it better. You get. So I think that will be all for this. If you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeffrey. Please, if you have any questions, please send them to the chat box so Jeffrey can answer. Uh, I'll give you guys 5 minutes to quickly do that, please. Okay, Jeffrey, I have one question. Something that's been an issue for me personally as a designer. Okay, it's about the divergent thinking you were discussing. I find it really hard to just jot down ideas as they come, because I'm always thinking, okay, this idea is just horrible. I definitely will not be able, I will definitely don't want to jot this down. So I end up spending more and more time trying to refine ideas that do not need refining. So I don't know if there is a way I could like stop doing this, because I know there are some ideas that comes to your head and you're just like, no, this is definitely not going to work. So throw it away. So my question is, do we necessarily really need to put down every single thing we think of during this scoping out of ideas, even though it looks like it's trash? Do we still have to put it down?
Okay, so yeah, I feel like with the divergent thinking, right? Like I said, the quantity over quality, that's the whole point. Okay. If you mainly focus on the refine, and then I've been a victim before where I normally try to refine them in the early stages, which I feel like as designers, we shouldn't really focus on that. You should be more of like thinking out loud, like coming up with whatever idea that comes into your mind. Just jot it down, because you realize I think there is this workshop, is it bad ideas or something, that normally for that workshop you are coming up with just crazy ideas, like ridiculous ideas, bad ideas. That's the whole point. And you might be surprised what you guys like after coming up with those ideas, what you actually scope down and actually like define a problem statement around it. It's really fascinating. And I feel like if you don't give that a shot, because like I said, I was also struggling with it, but then I started designing, not really focusing on the refinement, just whatever crazy idea that comes in mind, I just do it. I just write it down. If it's a layout, I just design it in Figma, just do it, coming up with a whole lot. And at the end of the day, when you look at those ideas, something might just click, right? And you'll be able to refine it better. Right. Yeah, so someone just said worst possible idea method. So it's a method that normally we use for our workshops when it comes to ideation, right? So you can actually give it a shot. It might look like it wouldn't work. Like you said, sometimes you feel like, nah, this one there, it'll be crazy. But you might be surprised when you are done with it, what you come up with, because it really helps. Your first design or solution that you come up with, your idea that you come up with, it might not necessarily be the best. You might think it's the best, but you'll be surprised if you are done like coming up with, let's say, 10 or 5 ideas. So that stage, just be mindful of the refinement. It might really hurt you as a designer. Did
All
I
right.
answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you very much. I will definitely try to work on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Samuel. Samuel is raising up his hand. Okay, go ahead, Samuel, please.
Yeah, hi. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to add to what Jeffrey said. So yeah,
Yeah.
it does happen a lot, especially when you are in the also like in a company setting, like when you're actually working in a full-time role where you have to sit in front of other stakeholders and give up ideas. It can come up a lot where you feel like this idea is terrible and stuff. So the method that um Hinson mentioned is a good way to start off, right? Because you'll be very surprised what you think is a terrible idea. You'll be very surprised that that's actually what solves the problem for the user, because the user doesn't have the biases you, the individual who is working on it, be it the product designer, the engineer, or the PM. You have a lot of biases mainly because you work on that feature all the time. You know it in and out. So you might think this is really not it, but the user might probably just want something very simple, right? So this is one of the ideas you can use. And also there are other ideas that allows people to feel free and feel like they won't be judged based on the ideas they give. I think there's something called brainwrite, where you can just write your ideas down and then pass it on to the next person for the next person to build upon it. So instead of you saying out your idea out loud and then being afraid of people criticizing you, people will be actually forced to make your idea better instead of just finding ways to point out the bad sides of that idea. So there are countless ideas that there are countless methods that you can try out and help you with that issue.
Wow, thank you very much, Samuel. That was insightful. Building up on ideas. Thank you so much. I just wrote that down. Okay. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add or a question they'd like to ask? I'm just going to give 1 minute for that, and if there's no one, we will round up with this session. If you have a question or if you'd like to say anything, just raise up your hand. Okay, Emmanuel, please go ahead.
Hi guys, good evening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just to buttress on this point, I'm actually commenting that it doesn't really sound like a bad idea in my opinion. Why? Because there is this thing called analysis paralysis where you are thinking about the ideas in your head and trying to refine them in your head and it's not making sense. It feels like, okay, this won't fly. So when you begin to drop them down on paper, and then it begins to come out. When this happens to me most times is when I'm running short on time. And instead of thinking about the ideas, I just start designing them, even if it doesn't really make sense. When I drop them on paper, I now see what I can improve on. So I feel that's not a bad idea or a bad way to go because the more time you spend trying to perfect the idea in your head, it takes so much more time. Just like when you're solving maths, you're calculating it in your head, you are really not making progress until you begin to drop it down on paper. It's much easier that way. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's very right. I agree with you, Manu. Thank you very, very much. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I think we're done for today. Once again, I want to thank you, Jeffrey, for coming to share your knowledge with us. And I want to thank everyone for making today's session a success. We're going to be back here, same time, next week, Sunday, same place. And I look forward to seeing you guys. Have a great evening and good night.
Good night.
Good night.